Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bethany. As we all know, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights just released Beatriz versus El Salvador, a case challenging El Salvador's complete ban on abortion. Pro-life leaders across the Americas are now celebrating the court's victory for life. Pro-abortion activists had hoped that this case would be Latin America's Roe v. Wade, affecting the countries under the American Convention on Human Rights. However, they left the courtroom defeated, despite attempts by pro-abortion media groups to misrepresent the decision. In reality, the court, in a nearly unanimous vote, did not declare abortion a human right, hence permitting pro-life laws to continue protecting life in Latin America. So we are so honored to have so many experts who have been involved heavily in this case to share with us the truth. What is this decision and what does this mean for Latin America? So to begin, we have Maria Quiroga, who is the Director of Research at the Global Center for Human Rights. She holds degrees in French and Argentine law from the University del Salvador and the University of Paris, Pantheon Sorbonne, as well as a master's degree in international law from the Columbian University of La Sabana. She's an adjunct professor of philosophy of law at the University del Salvador and actively participated in a university research on access to justice for women between 2017 and 2019. She was heavily involved in the Beatriz case hearings, and we're so honored to have her here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rachel, and thanks for the invitation. Actually, the Beatriz case was like Roe v. Wade, a failed case, a fraud orchestrated and funded by the abortion lobby that endangered not only justice and the rule of law, but also the lives of millions of Latin Americans. Thanks to God, we managed to prevent new Roe v. Wade that could have devastated over 600 million human beings. The reality is that the abortion machinery chose a vulnerable woman, psychologically abused her, and manipulated her into requesting an abortion in El Salvador, a very pro-life country where abortion is prohibited. The explicit goal was to force the legalization of abortion in that country and through the Inter-American Court across the entire continent. Beatriz was lied to and traumatized by being told she would die if she didn't have an abortion, putting her life and the life of her young daughter, Leilani, in danger. Beatriz had lupus, and her baby suffered from a severe disability, anencephaly. However, with proper care, her life was not at risk, and she gave birth to Leilani, who passed away a few hours later, and Beatriz herself lost her life 4 years later due to an accident. So the lie spread across all media was that Beatriz was forced to carry a baby without a skull, and that her health and life were harmed by the abortion ban. This was entirely false. In fact, terminating the pregnancy at any stage will have put her life at risk due to a recent scar from a prior C-section. But we brought the truth to light. We shed light on the judges, the lies of the abortion industry, the 90 million distributed among the 4 accusing NGOs and the Inter-American human rights system, the perverse objectives of the fraud, the conflicts of interest and irregularities in the case, and the systemic failures of the Commission and the Inter-American Court of Human Rights that endangered lives, sovereignty, and legal security throughout the continent. And we all won. The truth won, life won, justice and human rights won. None of the petitioners' demands were accepted. We clarified that in 98.5% of the cases admitted by the courts, states received some kind of condemnation. In this case, the court limited itself to condemning El Salvador on secondary issues for obstetric violence and recommended updating high-risk pregnancy protocols without mentioning abortion. Therefore, there are no negative consequences at the regional level. On the contrary, we must acknowledge great achievements. First, The Inter-American Court rejected the lies presented in the Beatriz case and confirmed that her death, years later, was not related to the abortion ban. Second, the court recognized the dignity of Leilani, Beatriz's daughter. Her existence and rights had been cruelly regenerated and visible by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and the petitioners. And the court refused to dehumanize her as a project, thus setting a hopeful precedent for the protection of the rights of unborn persons with disabilities, which had been in question. Third victory, the court rejected the claim to recognize abortion as a right. It did not require El Salvador to change its constitutions, laws, or include exceptions or protocols allowing abortion. In other words, it did not favor the abortion industry. Fourth victory, the court acknowledged that medical protocols and laws, like the innovative Born with Love initiative, are the best policy for protecting mothers and children. It did request improvements in high-risk pregnancy protocols, but without abortion. And fifth victories, the court reaffirmed El Salvador's sovereignty. This is another key shift in jurisprudence because the country is free to implement recommendations without external impositions. So, in other words, despite all the international pressure, the Inter-American Court rejected abortion as a right. It accepted that a country's absolute prohibition of abortion is indeed respectful of human rights. In fact, there was only one partially dissenting vote from Colombian judge Humberto Sierra Porto, highlighting the threats we faced. He criticized his fellow judges, stating that they abandoned their previous jurisprudence on sexual and reproductive rights. For this reason, this ruling is one of the most significant pro-life victories since the end of Roe v. Wade. It marks a turning point in the court jurisprudence, returning to respect for the sovereignty of nations in the letter and spirit of the American Convention, which gave rise to the Inter-American human rights system. This system is unique in the world for defending life from conception, making it the most comprehensive protector of human rights. However, we must stay vigilant. As this case was fraudulent and violated the convention, it should never have existed, and no similar cases should arise in the future. Dozens of cases prepared by the abortion lobby are already in the pipeline. They are already talking about a new fraud with the same financing and lies, the Esperancita case versus the Dominican Republic. So therefore, many challenges remain. We must demand urgent reforms in the Inter-American system to guarantee its transparency and impartiality. We must end this type of strategic litigation that manipulates the Inter-American human rights system to benefit economic, ideological, and political lobbies. We must dismantle the funding structures through which these lobbies have co-opted international organizations for their harmful interests, distorting and steering them away from their legitimate purposes and against the people. And we must demand that the representatives of our nations defend the values of our peoples and the institutions that safeguard our rights. Today, Beatriz and Leilani rest in peace. Let us have hope, because even though it may seem impossible and we're small, we should not fear. Let us work together with courage and strategy. God is with us in protecting life.
Thank you so much, Maria. And I think that you hit on such an important point when you mentioned that the one dissenting vote dissented because the court rejected the pro-abortion agenda. We know that this is a win for life. Thank you so much for being a voice for life in such an important realm. Our next speaker is Julio Pohl, who serves as legal counsel for Latin America with Alliance Defending Freedom International. As part of the team, he monitors the Latin American region and the Organization of American States. while also assisting allied lawyers in litigation to protect the right to life, religious freedom, and the family. Pohl earned his law degree at the National Autonomous University of Honduras and holds an LLM in human rights from the University of Navarra in Spain, where he is currently finishing his doctorate in law. He coordinated an amicus brief filed before the Inter-American Court of Human Rights on the Beatriz versus El Salvador case, which discussed the protections for unborn life in international law and the aftermath of Dobbs v. Jackson in the United States. Welcome, Julio.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Bethany and Pro-Life Global for having us here, and all the rest of the participants in the press conference as well as the audience. Yes, I would definitely like to continue what was said before. We at ADF International, we're happy that while the judge ruled against El Salvador, as Marianne was saying, we commend them for upholding the integrity of international human rights law and rejecting activist efforts to fabricate a so-called right to abortion, quote unquote, in the Americas. And this is very important because as we filed the amicus brief that you mentioned, and we tried to bring to the court the fact that international law does not contain any so-called quote unquote right to abortion. There's no abortion established in international law, even though many activist organizations, many NGOs, many pro-abortion organizations try and keep saying that day in and day out. That is not true. That is not the case. The reality is that international law protects life. The reality is that, for example, the American Convention of Human Rights, which was the convention that the Inter-American Court of Human Rights has to uphold, is, as was said before, the most protective international document for life, protecting life since the moment from conception. And that is very important that the judges did not steer from that, from the fact, from the letter of the document. We were also able to present them, and this is interesting how things work and how God makes things work and things happen, that the Dobbs decision was issued in 2022 before the case was even argued at the Inter-American Court. The case at the Inter-American Court was argued in March 2023, 1 year after Dobbs or 6 months after Dobbs. So the Inter-American Court had also that Dobbs decision at their view when they issued this Beatriz decision. And we were able as ADF also to present them a summary of Dobbs and saying them how it is important for courts to do their job and not enter into legislating or activities that do not belong to them. Especially also even though we want or restating also, sorry, that we want to protect life at all moments from conception to natural death. And that's what the Dobbs decision does at the same time. So explaining that to the court and not letting them be deceived by the Roe v. Wade previous precedent. Also, a very important note to say is that, as was said before by Marianne, the court did not use Artavia Murillo case. It's the previous case that was decided in 2012, in which the court did conceded many things for the abortion movement. There was a case against Costa Rica that involved IVF, and the court came to a very strong reasoning, not sound argument on how the Article 4 of the American Convention really does not protect life from conception. Very weird. I don't have time to explain that. But it's interesting that this new composition of the court in the Beatriz case steered away clearly from that precedent. We know at the same time that precedents don't hold the same in the Inter-American Court as they do in a regular constitutional court. But nonetheless, it is important that the court did not bring up that precedent. And in fact, what they did is say, we're not gonna rule on this matter of abortion as we have been asked by the petitioners. On the contrary, we're gonna say this other thing, which is just as I said before, the obstetric violence ruling. So that's it. We want to commend the court, and we are grateful that the decision came as it did. It's a huge victory for the pro-life movement. It's a huge, huge victory for the region. It's a huge victory for international law as well, as this court that has jurisdiction and on this matter decided this thing in this way. It's very important for us. It's very important for the movement. And as was said before, we continue working and monitoring any other case that comes in the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, as well as the court, to protect life, to defend life from conception. And we're happy to do it. And of course, everything can be only done with the power and the help of God. And we commend our work to Him. So thank you for having us. And we hope that this precedent brings light to the region.
Thank you so much, Julio. And it's encouraging to know that the example of the United States in our Dobbs decision, which we're celebrating the anniversary of tomorrow at the March for Life, is actually an inspiration and an example to the rest of the world that life is worth defending. Our next speaker is Professor Ligia Castaldi, who is a professor of law at Ave Maria School of Law, where she teaches international law. Her scholarship focuses on prenatal rights and international human rights law. Among others, she authored Abortion in Latin America and the Caribbean, the legal impact of the American Convention on Human Rights. She received a Master's of Law from Harvard Law School. Professor Castaldi worked for several international and governmental human rights agencies, including UNICEF's Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean and the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. She was also a legal advisor to the National Congress of Honduras on family issues. She was expert witness in Beatriz versus El Salvador and wrote amicus curiae in several other abortion cases before the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. Welcome.
The microphone.
I think that you may be muted, Professor Castaldi.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. I was saying that it's important to remember that this case was about a convention, the American Convention on Human Rights, which is a pro-life treaty that protects the right to life from conception. So it's a very unique international treaty, unique to Latin America, that comes from our Catholic culture, that comes from our Christian culture that respects human life. And unfortunately, there are people who disagree with this treaty and who want to turn it into a pro-abortion treaty, who want to interpret some expressions in the treaty to mean that the treaty allows for abortion and induced abortion in particular. So Beatriz is one of these cases. It's also important to mention that there was another case before Beatriz, and that was called Manuela versus El Salvador. That was an infanticide case. That was not a case about abortion. So that was also a fraudulent case. Like Beatriz was not a case about abortion. Beatriz was a case about determination of a pregnancy that led through a C-section that led to a premature birth. So it did not involve abortion either. But abortion organizations wanted to distort it to make it seem like this was really about elective induced abortion, which it was not. So why are the media saying and pro-abortion organizations saying that this was a pro-abortion decision? I don't know. I don't think anything excuses lying. And clearly what's going on is a blatant lie. Anybody who reads the decision online can see for themselves that the ruling does not order abortion in any shape or form. It does not declare a right to abortion. It does not interpret abortion into the American Convention. However, I believe that because these organizations have invested so much time and resources, without a doubt, in this litigation has taken place for over 11 years. So it has taken up a lot of resources and time. So they must justify it. I believe that they have to justify to the public, to their donors, that this investment was worth it. In the end, what the plaintiff organizations got here was very little. In the end, they only got a right to, or El Salvador being condemned for violating obstetric violence under the right to health. However, the Inter-American Court on Human Rights did not say that there was a reproductive right to abortion, that there were no sexual and reproductive rights, so it left that out of the ruling. It also condemned El Salvador because of violations to the right of judicial protections, because it said that there were excessive delays and a bureaucratization of the process. All of this, by the way, was caused by the pro-abortion NGOs themselves and the commission, who delayed this process in national courts and later at the inter-American level. It also awarded reparations. So the judgment also awarded reparations to these NGOs, $40,000, which is not a lot for them, and not a lot for in reparations because they had asked for $120,000, I believe. So in this sense, it can be said that it was not entirely favorable to El Salvador. However, it was more favorable than unfavorable because it did not, as previous speakers mentioned, and did not grant or recognize the central issue that was at the heart of the lawsuit, which was creating a right to abortion in the inter-American system. So it did not do that. It simply ignored all of the arguments that the plaintiffs gave, and it decided that El Salvador had not violated Beatriz's right to life by not providing her with an abortion. And it did not say categorically that there was no right to abortion. So in that sense, it cannot be compared to Dobbs, which was a very brave decision where the judges said specifically the US Constitution does not contain a right to abortion. Here, the court simply ignored the arguments and did not declare a right to abortion. That was good enough, though. That was already much more than was expected from the court. This was poised to be the abortion case in the inter-American system, and that is not what happened. So ultimately, the judges did not declare a right to abortion. And also very important to remember is that the justices did not declare that pregnancy was torture. And this is something that they were prompted to do. The commission and the plaintiffs were arguing that continuing the pregnancy for something like 8 weeks constituted torture, and the court said that it was not. So those are the main points in the court's decision in Beatriz. So it was definitely a decision worth celebrating, and the misinformation out there is very much wrong about this decision creating abortion rights.
Thank you so much, Professor Castaldi. Thank you for being a voice for life and for all the work that you did on this such important case for Latin America. Our next speaker is Sara Larin, who is the president of Fundación Vida, SV in El Salvador, a charitable foundation composed of citizen leaders deeply committed to the defense of life and family in El Salvador. In 2013, she was active during the beginnings of the Beatriz case, bringing attention to the stakes of this case for pro-life law in El Salvador. We are excited to hear from her reaction to the Beatriz case, as well as the pregnancy help resources available to pregnant women in El Salvador. Welcome, Sara.
Hi, it's an honor to be here today and to share my analysis with such distinguished pro-life leaders and advocates. My name is Sara Larin, and I am the president of Fundación Vida SV, a pro-life organization based in El Salvador. For over a decade, we have witnessed how pro-abortion groups have spread lies about Beatriz's case. In 2013, the Supreme Court of El Salvador made it clear that Beatriz's life was never in danger because of her pregnancy and denied the abortion request. However, these groups still decide to take the case to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, falsely claiming that Beatriz has died because she was denied an abortion. Fortunately, this lie was rejected by the court in its decision. We have also seen how some groups have used Beatriz and her family situation to gain political and economic benefits. This case is just one more example of attacks on human dignity. Members of our organization have actively participated in prayer campaigns held in front of the offices of the pro-abortion groups that provide legal representation for the case. We have also witnessed the power of prayer and the deep meaning of being a country named El Salvador. This nation has shown that by defending the truth, we have been able to prevent a false right to abortion from being accepted in an international law. It's clear that this case has been a major defeat for the abortion lobby. However, the people of El Salvador are worried because the Inter-American Court decided to condemn us for supposedly commitment of obstetric violence against Beatriz, which forced us to review our pregnancy care protocols, opening the possibility of legalizing abortion through the back door. What deeply saddened us even more in the court ruling did not recognize any rights for Leilani, the daughter of Beatriz, a Salvadorian child with a disability who had the right to life and health. We are also worried that when the ruling was published, the government accepted the condemnation in just a few hours. This also forces us to pay around $45,000 to pro-abortion groups using Salvadorian taxpayers' money. This money that could be used to support the maternity homes in El Salvador. For example, we work directly with Hogar Mater Filius, a maternity home that welcomes pregnant women in difficult situations. They provide housing, meals, legal and psychological support. They receive training in baking and cooking and earn a diploma upon completing the course. They receive full support so that they can move forward and stand on their own. As may know, El Salvador has maintained strong pro-life laws with a complete ban on abortion. This commitment to life is something we deeply value, and we continue to advocate for the defense of life in all its forms. We are also praying for the United States and the changes that are coming after the reversal of Roe v. Wade, trusting that these changes will help protect the sanctity of life even more. The fight to protect life is a global struggle. And as we defend life in our respective countries, we also empower one another to stand strong. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. May God bless all of you and your work. And may we continue fighting for the protection of life wherever we are. Thank you.
Sara, the work that you do brings hope to women, and it brings hope to other nations as an example of defending the sanctity of life. So thank you for the role that you've played for so many years in El Salvador in the pro-life movement. Our next speaker is Dr. Melina Carmona. She is the director of the National Centro de Ayuda para la Mujer in Bolivia, or Center of Help for the Woman. She is also a primary practitioner of fertility care in Bolivia, the founder of the Center of Family Care. She received her medical degree from the Universidad del Valle and a master's in human rights with an emphasis on abortion issues from Universidad Libre de las Americas. She will be sharing with us the resources available to women in her country in light of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights decision to allow sovereign nations to protect life in law. Her medical experience testifies to the need for pro-life nations to treat both mother and child as patients worthy of the medical care that they need. In Bolivia, abortion is legal in some circumstances, which is a great misfortune, yet in Latin America in general, this decision has brought national sovereignty, has allowed them to protect life in law. And that is made possible by people like Dr. Melina, who are defending women from the grassroots. They're giving them the resources that they need to be able to keep their babies by defending the dignity of both the mother and the child. Welcome, Melina.
Thank you. Hello, I feel honored to be able to reflect on a response to pro-life ruling. This ruling by the Inter-American courts is a historic and authentic response to the real needs of women and society in Latin America. Today in Bolivia, abortions are performed using a protocol without an abortion law, which allows the abortion of full-term children through cesarean sections, allowing the children to die because they are not given medical assistance or food. This protocol has been carried out by IPAS since 2015. After working for more than 19 years in Bolivia, caring for women with an unsick pregnancy allows us to describe to reality to unexpected motherhood in Latin America. Women with unexpected pregnancies are faced with the dilemma of whether or not to continue with their pregnancy. A pregnancy in mostly unexpected situation in woman's life, which means for the woman a complete change in her life. And now, abruptly, she becomes the absolute responsibility for life she carries in her womb, a human life. This isolates her, corners her, offering her a false solution in abortion. This shows a failure in society that is not able to offer women the opportunity to receive the support which she needs today, to be able to take care of that life, which will enforce that woman into the strength that drives the whole society. The greatest power in developed countries is not based on the economy, but on the value of families that protect with great effort the life of those who are their future. The nucleus of this family are the women who generate life. Helping a pregnancy woman is helping the progress of society. Today, whole generations are confused by the increasing penetrating message of rejection of pregnancy. Since life today is considered an issue and disease in medicine, we must tell the truth to the youth of today. Life is the main value, which we must protect with all the efforts which we need. All movements and trends, ones who advocate discriminalization of abortion, and those that fight today, whole generation are confused by the increased penetrating method of rejection pregnancy. All movements and trends, ones who advocate discriminalization of abortions, and those that fight for life that is gestating in the mother's womb, agree that abortion is able, and that every woman's abort of necessity, not of a pleasure. Abortion is not solving the domestic violence she is experiencing, neither it helps to improve the communication with the parents or the partner, not it remedy the economic situation she is going through. The Women's Health Centers in Bolivia offers free psychological health, food, referral, shelters, gynecological and general medical services. We are working both for the life of mothers and their children as well. The freedom to choose is based upon the knowledge of what is the object of the choice. The woman who finds herself in a vulnerably emotional state has the right to make a deep reflection on her situation and receive help to glimpse viable alternative solution to her problems. These types of service are not offered in the centers where abortion are performed, both legal and clandestine. Not are alternative offered to solve the different conflict that woman faces in this situation. Abortion kills human life, but above that it destroys and cauterizes in the conscience of man and society to be able to distinguish good from evil. This is what has historically encouraged the great genocide and abuse from men against men. And even these genocides that horrify us fall short with the number of victims, the cruelty of the procedures, and the violence exercised on women and their children. Working in favor of life is contributing to the renewal of society through the construction of the common good. It is not possible to build the common good without recognizing and protecting the right to life, on which all other inalienable rights of the human being and founder and development. Only respect for life can establish the guarantee the most precious and necessary goods of society, such as democracy and peace. We hope that legal abortion will end in Bolivia and that women will be treated with better budget and that rural women will not be used to pressure them to abort in order to increase the statistic that allow NGOs working in Latin countries in favor to abortion to receive high amounts of money. Only be protecting human life and helping women in pregnancy crisis will contribute to a society where justice, freedom, and peace prevail. The degree of civilization of society is directly proportional to respect they have for life. No human being can have the right to dispose of another life.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carmona. I was so blessed to be able to visit the Pregnancy Resource Center, which Dr. Carmona directs in La Paz, Bolivia this past summer, and seeing the resources that are offered practically to women who find themselves in unplanned pregnancies, in the loving staff, the available resources, and the environment that they foster there in Bolivia, and especially at the center that Dr. Carmona runs, testifies to the truth that women do not need abortion to succeed. Abortion hurts women, and sovereign nations in Latin America should protect the sanctity of life and the sanctity of women. So thank you, Dr. Carmona, for being a voice for life and a voice for women.
Thank you so much. And sorry for my English.
No, muchas gracias por estar aquí.
Muchas gracias.
Our next speaker is Magda Núñez, who is a graduate of the University of San Ignacio de Loyola, where she studied communications and journalism, and San Ignacio University, where she studied marketing. She is a pro-life advocate in Peru, founder of Una Voz Diferente, or One Different Voice, and is Pro-Life Global's Peruvian representative. She, like Dr. Carmona, gives us a perspective about how this decision and how pro-life law is unfolding in the different countries in Latin America that will be touched by the Beatriz versus El Salvador decision. Welcome, Magda.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you, Bethany, for Life Global in general. a great family of pro-life activists, for giving me the opportunity, the chance of being part of this amazing panel. I'm so honored to be considered as a voice that can bring light specifically or especially on the effects of the Beatriz case in Peru. So first, to start, as Rachel mentioned, I am an activist. An activist and a journalist. So my point of view comes from those areas of society, sort of that realm where we followed the case of the Salvador versus the Inter-American Court of Human Rights in the Beatriz decision. We had been following it for the whole past year very closely. Then again, because we were here in Peru, pro-life activists recognized that was a very important case for our region in general. And then as journalists as well, because we wanted to communicate the truth. And it has been mentioned since the beginning that this case was based on lies. And from a journalism perspective, it was crazy for me, to say the least, or to say it in some way, to see how the media had been sharing this misinformation around the Beatriz case, and how the pro-abortion organizations took it and continued sharing those lies. And then it became this huge case, of course, and most people thought that it was the story that the pro-abortion organizations told. They thought that that was the real story. So in Peru, in terms of how the media covered it, it is true that our media is not continually speaking about abortion or those topics. It is not one of the main points of the agenda in our media. However, it is through social media mostly that a lot of Peruvians and activists, and of course, the pro-abortion organizations that operate here in Peru, found out and continue keeping up with the information. So when, after waiting for a long some months at least last year, we finally found out about the decision that it was in favor of El Salvador. And that honestly, personally, I was really happy that the truth overcame the lies. Because as we mentioned, and two main victories that I highlight is that first, that it was very clear, it was set clear that Beatriz didn't die for an abortion. And that was one of the main key points that the pro-abortion organizations or movement or lobby continued pushing forward. And then the second victory that I highlight as well was that they didn't force the legalization of abortion in explicit, at least the explicit legalization of abortion in El Salvador. And so how does this affect my country in particular? So one of the main things that I highlight is that this helped with not setting a precedent that was set to pressure Peru and other countries, other Latin American countries, into expanding their legislation around abortion. On the contrary, as it has been mentioned as well, it actually has set a really good precedent for the pro-life cause. It has set a precedent of protecting every nation's sovereignty, and these new ideologies not like putting themselves over the sovereignty of our nation. So I think at the end of the day, it was a good precedent, a favorable precedent for the pro-life cause. And of course, it means for our nation, it meant that we were saved at least from that a negative precedent that would pressure us into expanding legislation around abortion. And also, as well as it has been mentioned, it meant that we got to uphold our sovereignty over any other decision that the Inter-American Court would decide. And actually, legislative work has continued around that specific area of upholding our sovereignty. For example, around those last months of decision in the Beatriz case, here in Peru, some congressmen, some congress people started working around this legislation, and on October, a bill was passed, that a bill through which our judges, our Peruvian judges, are going to be able to interpret a constitutional law according to the human rights treaties and international sentences where Peru is a part of. So that means that if our nation isn't part of that sentence or that case, or wasn't a part of that treaty or that case, then it doesn't have the power to condition our country, at least our judges, when they have to interpret our constitutional law. And that is very important, because this was also, I think, thought in case the Beatriz case was negative for the pro-life cause, because in that sense, we would have been protecting our country from that decision. And so our country, Peru, is a very pro-life country, not only through its legislation, but also the legislation actually reflects what the vast majority of our society thinks, and the vast majority of our society is pro-life. Now, the only abortion in general is illegal, but the only case where it is legal would be for therapeutic abortions. And for those cases in particular, there is already a protocol set for action for medical practice. And this protocol is a medical protocol. So it's actually doctors that have the power of putting into practice and evaluating the situation in order to define these cases. So, but in general, and to wrap it up, in general, Peru has the mindset of saving both lives in every single situation as it is possible. And our efforts, I do believe, that should increase around that. And in Peru also considers that pro-life law also is not only for the preborn babies that we love and we fight for, but also for the babies that are already living, and for the mothers and for the families. Those are also pro-life laws, so promoting adoption, also considering kids with special needs, mothers that lose babies without wanting to lose them, so miscarriages and so on. Our legislators have been working around those topics as well. So as in general, I'm very thankful for the decision that the Inter-American Court of Human Rights displayed. And as it has been mentioned as well, we will keep an eye on that and make sure that in our countries and in our region, we continue having those fights that will have grant us victories for the pro-life cause.
Thank you so much, Magda. I'm so glad as well that Peru will retain her national sovereignty to continue protecting life and law. But thank you for also being a voice for that, and for the work that you do with your organization in spreading the message of truth around the country. Our final message is from Maria Paula Aldana, and she actually she is on a flight right now to come to the United States to speak at an important panel event for the pro-life cause here. So we have a video from her, and I will share that in just a moment. Maria is a speaker, writer, and digital content creator who used to be a pro-abortion advocate, but experienced a profound conversion at the age of 20, leading her to embrace the dignity of human life. She's the founder of Somos Suyos, a growing ministry in Colombia focused on human dignity, sexuality, and emotional development, with a community of over 200,000 people. She's a prominent voice in Colombian politics, Maria Paula has delivered impactful interventions in the Congress of the Republic of Colombia and the General Assembly of the Organization of American States, advocating for pro-life and pro-family values. Maria Paula is such a distinguished guest, and her message kind of brings us to a close and gives us the implications of this decision, not just for El Salvador, but for the rest of Latin America. We've heard from here, like in Peru, Colombia, all of these Latin American nations under the American Convention on Human Rights are going to be affected by this decision. Can everyone see? Well, okay.
Hello, my name is Maria Paula Aldana, and I'm a pro-life advocate from Colombia and the founder of SOS Ministries that focuses on integral sexual education. And today I'd like to briefly discuss on how the Inter-American Court of Human Rights recent decision in the Beatriz versus El Salvador case is not only a victory for life, but also a vital defense of national sovereignty and authentic human rights across Latin America. First, to understand the broader implications of this ruling, is vital to examine the socioeconomic realities surrounding poverty, access to education, and abortion, among others, in Colombia and the entire region. For example, according to the World Bank, as of 2023, 1 in 4 people in Latin America lived on less than $6.85 per day. And in Colombia, for instance, 33% of the population lives in extreme poverty, making Colombia one of the most unequal countries in the region. Education, a key factor in fighting poverty, still suffers from disparities that persist, especially in secondary education, showing the critical need of continued efforts to improve educational access, completion rates, and the effectiveness of sexual education programs in the entire continent. And it turns out, as it has been proven, that abortion laws directly intersect with these socioeconomic realities. Here in Colombia, for example, the Constitutional Court's decision to decriminalize abortion up to 24 weeks has sparked significant debate regarding its broader implications on society. Abortion disproportionately affects vulnerable women who lack access to comprehensive education and economic opportunities in our countries. And that is why these laws not only fail to address the root causes of unplanned pregnancies in Latin America, but also contribute to a societal framework where life is undervalued and a culture that promotes a distorted vision of human sexuality, relationships, and human identity itself. True sexual education must focus on the dignity of the human person and the sanctity of human life. But unfortunately, many sex education programs shaped by pro-abortion ideologies often reduce human relationships to mere biological functions, ignoring the deeper emotional, psychological, spiritual, and relational dimensions. But this approach exacerbates societal issues as evidenced by the rising rates of teenage pregnancies and the rupture of family structures in regions with liberal abortion laws. The Beatriz versus El Salvador case provides a crucial counter-narrative. By refusing to declare abortion as a human right, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights upheld the sovereignty of nations like El Salvador and affirmed the principle enshrined in Article 4 of the American Convention of Human Rights. The right to life must be protected by law in general from the moment of conception. This decision is a call for Latin America to strengthen its commitment to life and for nations to invest in holistic solutions that address poverty, expand access to quality education, and promote authentic sexual education rooted in the respect for the human person. As a young pro-life woman from Colombia, I see this moment as a turning point, and I think the pro-life movement must seize this opportunity to champion life and to offer an authentic vision of hope, dignity, and love to all, especially the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I think that Maria Paula hit on such an important closing point that this pro-life victory should bring to mind what the multilateral American Convention on Human Rights does say. The member states regulated by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights are formally bound to Chapter 2, Article 4. Every person has the right to have his life respected. This right shall be protected by law and in general from the moment of conception. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his life. In this spirit, and thanks to the Beatriz decision, pro-life nations in Latin America can continue to protect life in law from the moment of conception. I'm going to turn it over again to Bethany, and she is going to moderate some of the questions that we may have from the press who are present. You can utilize the chat box to ask questions, and then Bethany, the Pro-Life Global President, will be choosing them and directing them toward our speakers.
Sorry, it took me a second here. Well, thank you everybody for all of our speakers. Really appreciate you guys to the moderation you've done. We want to open the floor just for a couple questions. If anyone has those, please put them in while you guys are putting them in. I had one question. I believe Monica touched on this, but my question had to do with the fact that